Do you remember when Elizabeth Taylor married Mike Todd 1 week after her divorce from Michael Wilding? Yeah, I wasn't alive then either, but we're going to talk about it. While working on his film Around the World in 80 Days, Mike hosted a small sailing party inviting one of his assistant directors, Kevin McClory, who in turn invited two of his own friends, Michael Wilding and his wife, Elizabeth Taylor. Mike would later find out that not only were Liz and Michael separating, but that she was low-key dating Kevin McClory. Was it strategic or just a coincidence? I don't know, but Mike hosted a barbecue a few days later, inviting the Wildings once again. His attention towards Liz did not go unnoticed, however, by his bestie, Eddie Fisher, who was attending the barbecue with his wife, Debbie Reynolds. You may know them as Carrie Fisher's parents. As Mike walked Princess Leia's mom and dad to their car, Eddie whispered, "You're in love with Elizabeth." Mike told him to get in the car. After filing her separation papers from Michael, Liz had been sitting in MGM Vice President Benny Thau's office when Mike Todd burst in, grabbed her by the arm, and dragged her down the hall to an empty office, where he spent an hour and a half telling her that she was going to marry only one guy, and that was him. How romantic. At least Liz thought that it was, stating that she was absolutely hypnotized. Mike pursued her fiercely, calling her every day while she was on location filming Raintree County. He broke off his ongoing affair with Evelyn Keyes and crushed the heart of his friend, Kevin McClory. Their courtship was short and fiery. The pair were constantly in the papers for their very public spats, some that they even staged, for they greatly enjoyed making up afterwards. 24-year-old Liz was 3 months pregnant with their daughter Liza when she married 50-year-old Mike in Acapulco on February 2nd, 1957. A few weeks later, Around the World in 80 Days would be nominated for 8 Oscars and would go on to win 5. Liz and Mike rented a home in Palm Springs from Leo Spitz out of Universal Studios right across the street from Kirk and Anne Douglas, Michael Douglas's parents. Anne said that she'd never seen Mike so besotted with any woman as he was with Elizabeth. Mike was so in love with her that Liz once mentioned that she felt like having a meal from a restaurant they visited in Paris, so Mike chartered a plane to fly the meal in from France. On March 21st, 1958, Mike called Liz out to the front yard of their Palm Springs home, and she was greeted by a magnificent display of Van Cleef & Arpels. He told her to pick whatever she wanted. It was just a normal Friday in the Todd household. The next day, while having their usual game of tennis, Mike asked Kirk if he wanted to go to New York with him later that day. Mike was being honored by the Friars Club for Showman of the Year. Liz was sick and unable to go with him. They were set to stop in Missouri first to see Harry Truman and then would carry on to New York. Kirk was super stoked about this because he really liked Harry Truman, and he went home to tell Anne all about it. Anne was 6 months pregnant with their son Eric, and knowing that Kirk would be heading out soon to support the premiere of his new movie The Vikings, told him absolutely not. She said that he could fly commercial and meet Mike there. Anne later said she didn't know what came over her. She just had a weird feeling about it. The two fought over it, with Kirk deciding that he was going to pass on the trip completely. That evening at the Todds, Mike had already hugged Liz 4 times that night, but he decided to go up to her room where she was recovering from her illness and hug her for a 5th and what would be the final time, before heading out to Burbank where he would take his plane, the Lucky Liz, to New York. At 10:41 p.m., the Lucky Liz taxied down the runway in the middle of a rainstorm on its way to the city that never sleeps. The next morning on March 22nd, Associated Press correspondent Jim Bacon got a phone call from a fellow reporter out near Albuquerque. They had found Jim's name on a passenger list from a Lockheed Lodestar that had crashed into the mountains nearby. Jim was supposed to be on that trip with Mike, but wasn't able to make it. "Is anyone injured?" he asked. "Everyone's dead," was the response. Liz had called Mike's personal secretary, Dick Hanley, earlier that morning when she had never received a phone call from Mike that he had promised. When Dick opened the door to her bedroom along with her doctor, Rex Kennemer, Liz knew. Kirk and Anne were in their car on the way to LA when they turned on the radio, the devastating news of the crash filling the car. Kirk pulled over to the shoulder and hugged Anne tight while they cried together. "Darling, you saved my life. I will always trust your intuition from now on," he said. Debbie Reynolds rushed over to Liz's house to help her take care of the kids. Little Liza was only 8 months old when her father perished in that plane crash. Debbie could hear Liz screaming when she pulled into the driveway. Debbie's husband, Eddie, was in New York, where he had just prepped a 16-verse parody of the theme song to Around the World in 80 Days that he was set to perform at Mike's Friar Roast later that night. Mike's funeral was held in Chicago with a memorial in Hollywood 3 days later. More than 1,000 people showed up to mourn the death of Mike Todd. Mike was Liz's first great love, and she had said that she didn't think she'd ever survive his loss. But she did, thanks to the support of Mike's best friend, Eddie Fisher. But we'll talk about that in the next one.